Scent Control 2012, Part 1, Why Do It? This is our 2012 view of scent control. It's going to change in the next year, as we're always learning new things. But first, let's talk about why we worry about it. We hear people say things all the time, like, nothing can completely remove human scent, so why try? I just play the wind. I still see deer, what do I need scent control for? My grandpa always got a deer, and he smoked and smelled like a locker room. You can't fool a deer's nose. How did the Indians manage to kill deer without all this scent nonsense? Carbon suits don't work anyway. Why spend the money? It's too much of a hassle. The one we hear most often is that deer can still smell us, so why try? We hear about so-called studies that have been done in which a dog can still smell you in a scent-locked suit. So what? Can you still see the guy in the camouflage suit in this picture? Yeah? Then why wear camouflage? The dog can still see you in it. It makes no sense to say that because you cannot completely remove your scent, it is not worth trying to reduce it. That would be like saying that if you cannot make yourself invisible, it's not worth the effort to use camouflage to reduce your visibility. We humans have great eyesight, most of us anyway, so it is easy for us to tell that camouflage is helping, but it's not so easy with scent. We don't smell so good, and I mean that in the nicest way. Why is it that we all pay money for clothes that don't make us completely invisible? But some of us won't pay for clothes because they don't make us completely unsmellable. Why do we accept that deer will still be able to see us when we are wearing camouflage? But some of us say that if scent control isn't complete, it isn't worth doing. That makes no sense. Both sight and smell are important tools deer use, so we should try to reduce both our visibility and our odor. Reduced visibility. Every hunter tries to use visual camouflage. I want you to look very closely at the guy on the left. I have removed the color wavelengths that a deer cannot see. That's the reds and oranges. And I've left the ones that they can see, which are the greens and blues. Notice how blurry he is? That is a rough representation of how well a deer sees. Now notice the guy on the right. He's wearing camo, but I am illustrating that he has poor scent control. Odors are wafting off his body as illustrated by the bright red flares. A deer can smell him from 300 yards away. We worry about being seen, but deer use smell more than any other sense. Deer vision is something scientists have only recently begun to understand. Research by Gino D'Angelo and Carl Miller at the University of Georgia revealed that a deer sees with the equivalent of 2100 in a human. So if a deer could read, an eye chart would look like the one at the right of this picture. Deer vision is important, but they have very poor visual acuity. They do have good motion detectors and good peripheral vision, but they have to be pretty close to you to take advantage of their vision in most cases. In contrast, a deer can detect you from a long distance, even with something like standing corn between you and him. Now let's take our well-camouflaged hunter with poor scent control and place him in a field. We'll take the guy without camo, but with good scent control, and place him in the field. Guess which guy the deer is going to detect. My story is a common one. I lived out of state for about 20 years and only occasionally got to come home for a week or two to hunt deer during the Michigan firearms season. Year after year, we hunted the same way. We usually had 4 guys hunting, including me and my brother-in-law Don. We walked back every morning just before daylight and got into our big wooden farm stands. Here's Don's stand, and here's my stand. And here's the path that we took into the stands. We left our scent along the trails, and the wind blew depending on which way it was coming from. Here on opening morning, it was coming from the southwest. The next morning, it was coming from the east. By the middle of day 2, we had created what was basically a deer-free zone around us. Occasionally, we would see a buck on opening morning, but if we saw one after that, it was usually running to escape the neighbors or one of us walking around the farm. We were our own worst enemies. We seldom saw deer except at the very edge of light after day 2. We always wondered what happened to them. Oh, how things have changed. After retiring in 2006, I began to get serious about understanding whitetails and how they operate. Here are my stats from 2011. I sat 60 times for a total of 190 hours. I saw 485 deer. That's one every 24 minutes, and 8 deer per sit. I did have 4 skunks, but they were mostly behind the house here. I saw 206 does. That's a doe every 66 minutes. 83 bucks. That's one every 2 hours on average. But I saw 38 bucks in shooting distance. That's one every 4.5 hours. And I saw 4 bucks that I estimated to be 3.5 or older. It's not only the number of sightings that change, but the pattern. Here I am showing my buck sightings in blue, my doe sightings in red, and doe to buck ratios in green for each 15 days of the Michigan deer hunting season and for the whole season. On average, my doe to buck ratios were about 2, but there's something really interesting here. My buck sightings in October were the lowest of the year. They went up in early November, when the rut was in full swing, but back down during gun season, the last 2 weeks of November. Then they went to the highest of the year in December, more than double the rate in October. In the 2 counties where I own property, there are about 13 hunters per square mile, and almost 4 bucks per square mile were killed by the end of November. So what is happening here? I think there are 3 things that factor into this dramatic increase in the number of bucks seen on my property after many of the bucks in the area have been killed. First and foremost, there is very little detectable hunting pressure on my properties. It seems to them that the property is safe. A major part of this feeling of safety relates to the fact that they do not smell much human scent on my property. Second, they are feeling pressure all around. The surrounding farms were trampled all over by hunters during gun season, and shots have been blazing at them from all sides. Finally, there's a second rut going on, and it is just about as intense or more so than the first rut. The reason for this is that the new doe fawns are going into estrus. This period can actually be more intense than the earlier rut because there are fewer estrus does to go around, so all the boys are hyper excited and frustrated. All this activity would normally be happening at night, except for the fact that these deer feel safe on my property. So how do folks wreck their properties? This right here is a picture that we do not want to see on our properties. Here are some examples of the anatomy of a scent bust. They bust your trail more than any other way. On this day, I hunted a wooded area near the top right of the picture and walked out around the canary grass field near midday. Later, I came out for an evening hunt, walking in from the south to hunt over a food plot at the bottom of the picture. I sat there for about an hour when I heard noises and saw a running deer to the west. A buck was chasing some deer. After a few minutes, a doe walked out, coming towards my food plot. Surely she would lure the buck towards me. But wait, she stopped stiff in her tracks at my trail. 2 or 3 minutes passed while she smelled my tracks and tested the wind. She followed my track back in the direction I had come from. She stared in several directions nervously. Then she made her way back into the woods. She didn't blow, she didn't run, she just changed her plans and moved back to an area she felt was safe. Another hour passed, and I saw another doe come out of the same woods I had hunted earlier. When she intercepted my trail, she too came to a stop, went through a routine similar to the first one, following my trail back, and then finally she turned and went back into the woods again. Again, without a lot of concern or excitement, she simply knew the direction of the danger and quietly avoided it. Obviously, my boots were contaminated. At that time, my routine was to keep my boots in muddy water in a bin. That morning, I had noticed some pellets floating in it. In retrospect, I believe the water was rancid, and the deer did not like that odor. I have since fixed that problem, thanks to Jake, and I will tell you how to treat your boots in the next video so that something like this never happens to you. Now, in this example, I'm going to show you what mayhem touching a single branch caused for me. This was a brand new stand that I had never sat in. It had been placed in a strategic location to watch several other stand sites in order to scout them for buck activity. It was quickly and easily accessible along a thick fence row I had cut a trail through for access. There was only one problem. I was blocked on the way in by a small branch that had fallen across the trail. I reached out with my cotton-gloved hand, grabbed it with 2 fingers, and tossed it up on top of the overhead brush. Only one problem, it fell part way down. Oh well. I went on to my stand. I sat there for an hour or so when a doe and 2 fawns walked by. Soon after, a group of antlerless deer moved out of the woods into an area that was planted with oats and began to feed. The first doe moved over to my trail, but never noticed anything until she got to that branch, when she went stiff and all hell broke loose. She started blowing. She scurried along the fence row, blowing all the way, then stood in the cover of the fence row, blowing over and over and over again. Meanwhile, the deer behind me all tensed up, kept feeding, but stayed up near the wooded area. Slowly, darkness fell. I was stuck in the tree, when finally the matriarch left the group and came over to the spot where the other doe had been blowing. After some minutes, she worked her way around right into my wind and started moving towards me. When she got 15 yards away, our eyes locked. She blew, moved back with the group, blowing all the way. Folks, every porous thing on your body, even if it is treated with activated carbon, is going to produce scent if you touch anything with it. We mow our trails wide in order to avoid brushing up against anything. Whenever possible, all that touches anything on the way to the stand is our rubber boots, and they have been treated to remove all extraneous odor, including the rubber smell. More about that later. It's not the deer you see that matter, it's the ones you don't see. You are going to see this guy no matter what level of scent control you have. He's the button buck, the dumbest creature in the woods. The 1.5-year-old is not much more careful. You will see him too no matter what you do, although you will see a lot more of them with scent control than without it. But if you hunt in a pressured area like I do, with over 1,300 per square mile, there is someone you are not likely to see except rarely, and probably never up close if you do not use extreme scent control, and that is the 3.5-year and older buck. The 3.5-year-old got where he is by not tolerating human scent or any unusual scent, like cover scents, for example. You can fool a deer's nose. If you can reduce your human scent to 1/10, the deer may think you are 10 times as far away as you are. For an archery hunter, 10 or 20 yards makes all the difference in the world. Bill Vail calls this the faint scent illusion. Deer in southern Michigan smell people 24/7, 365. Their job, the deer, is to figure out whether that odor is a threat to them. The less odor you produce, the lower the threat. Playing the wind. Consideration of the wind is probably the most important decision a hunter needs to make. But most of us don't know what is happening to it 100 yards away. It is swirling, twirling, rising and falling with thermals, changing direction through the day, and being dissected by the mature deer. Playing the wind without concern about scent control is not a viable game plan for pressured Michigan deer. Not worrying about human scent is a relatively new idea. Rifles and shotguns allowed modern hunters to reach out to deer from longer distances. This is why Grandpa still got a buck while chewing and smoking his cigar. Even with the best bows and equipment available today, including crossbows, a hunter should get within 30 yards of a deer before taking a shot. To archery hunt with poor scent control is a sure means to reduce the number and age of shootable deer you see. How did the Indians manage without all these products? Scent control was paramount when Native Americans hunted whitetail deer. In his book, Hunting with the Bow and Arrow, Saxton Pope devotes an entire chapter to his experience with Ishi. Ishi was the last member of the Yahi tribe, still living alone in the wilds of Northern California, when he was discovered at the age of 49 in 1911. He lived the remaining 5 years of his life at the University of California, Berkeley, where he taught the faculty of anthropology much about his skills, activities, and culture, including the art of hunting deer with a bow and arrow. Ishi's method according to Saxton. He observed the direction of the prevailing winds, the position of the sun. He noted water holes, game trails, buck lookouts, deer beds, the stage of the moon. He located the hiding place of the old bucks. He prepared for the hunt. He would eat no fish the day before the hunt and smoke no tobacco. He rose early, bathed in the creek, rubbed himself with the aromatic leaves of the yerba buena plant. He washed out the mouth, drank water, but ate no food. He dressed in a loincloth, but without shirt, leggings, or moccasins. And then he set out, bow and quiver at his sides. Native Americans understood and used extreme scent control. They had to if they wanted to survive, because the white-tailed deer uses its nose to survive. Scent control is the essential ingredient to keep your hunt area fresh, to see more and older deer, for consistent success, for a higher quality hunting experience. I know that Jake would never have killed this 5.5-year-old buck last year without extreme scent control, because he had to walk past that buck's bedding area, upwind of it, waited for him to get up, and shot him with an arrow. Coming up next, Scent Control 2012 Part 2, How to Do It. Thanks for watching another WAS video.